You're listening to Awake Radio, straight talk to the awake and aware.
We are the ungovernable. We are the free. We are the awake. These unjust laws, rules, and regulations do not apply to us. These evil men and women in their glass houses of transparency to those awake will help shatter and expose their lies, deceit, and corruption towards humanity and the earth. Together, our goal is to awaken the unaware and to change our world back to a peaceful society and end all wars. Their evils will perish. Let it be so. You're tuned into Awake Radio. awakeradio.us, awakeradio.co.uk, Awake Radio Australia, Awake Radio South Africa.
Thank you for tuning in this Tuesday, July 21st, here on Organic News on Awake Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. The first two interviews that I have were pre-recorded from earlier today. And I'm going to start us off with Daniel Burke, who last Thursday, the event on Glass-Steagall, Daniel Burke, a week and 1 day ago, last Monday, confronted, or rather just questioned Hillary Clinton on her position on Glass-Steagall when she spoke at the New School here in New York City. If you look up any article on Daniel Burke asking Hillary Clinton a simple question about her views on Glass-Steagall, they call him a heckler. And he was basically just escorted from the premises. He wasn't arrested, thank goodness. And here is the interview with Daniel Burke. Okay, Daniel Burke from the LaRouche PAC, who there was an action last Thursday, or just this past Thursday, the 16th, down in front of the Federal Hall, New York City, sharing, flyers and information with the public and with many tourists that were down there about reinstating Glass-Steagall, which your organization is working on.
Yes.
And so also you just this last Monday, Hillary Clinton spoke at the New School, and you just basically questioned her on her stance on reinstating Glass-Steagall and got no comment. Can you talk about that first off?
Yeah, Catherine, thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay. What we're in right now is the most incredible strategic moment that we've probably ever seen. The danger of world war, of real thermonuclear war, has never been greater. And the European financial system is in an onrushing financial collapse, which is evident to anyone who cares to pay attention. So we are right around the corner from a breakdown that is being intentionally orchestrated, especially by the forces associated with the British monarchy. And therefore, we have to take immediate measures to restore a Franklin Roosevelt-style approach to dealing with this Wall Street, City of London evil and massive physical economic collapse of this country. And the exciting thing is that there are actually people in the U.S. Senate who recognize what a horrifying moment we're in, and they are calmly and resolutely acting in the direction of the one policy that could change everything at this instant, and that is the restoration of Glass-Steagall. And go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
Well, so the point is that what we're going to need to do is put the whole system through bankruptcy. We're going to have to actually take the big banks, the biggest banks in the country. We're going to need to break them up between speculative activity and commercial activity, which means that you're going to take the masses and masses of derivatives debts, and you're simply going to cancel them and force the investment bankers to swallow their own losses. And this is going to, that deserves applause. And that's going to greatly protect and improve the living situation of the average American person. And it's urgently needed to be done right now. So here's the story about what happened with Hillary Clinton. May I go ahead with this?
Sure.
Okay, so basically, Senator Warren introduced to Glass-Steagall with 3 other senators on Tuesday, 2 weeks ago today. That Thursday, Martin O'Malley came forward strongly endorsing Glass-Steagall, again, as he has before, saying we need to prosecute people responsible for the financial collapse of 2008, and we need to restore Glass-Steagall. And Monday, Hillary Clinton was slated to give her major economic policy speech at the New School in Manhattan. Monday morning, a week and a day ago.
Right.
So we showed up. We showed up with, and what was in my mind was what Lyndon LaRouche has said at a town hall that was held on Saturday of that weekend. He has said, look, we've got to march on to victory. We've got to claim the victory. There's no time to complain. We've got to go for the victory now. We have to win. What's the timeline on this? The Congress is going out of session at the end of July. And the whole system is in a tumbling collapse as we speak. So we showed up at the event. We had a big, beautiful picture of Franklin Roosevelt. We had a big quote from Hamilton on the subject of the creation of real value. And we had big signs. Glass-Steagall is dead, but Wall Street is dead, but we can save the nation, restore Glass-Steagall. And I managed to get into Hillary's event with one of my colleagues, and we sat down with about 250 other people in a darkened auditorium, and everything was perfectly arranged. Millions must have been spent on creating this event to be the moment. I mean, here's what the intention was. The intention was to say, okay, Hillary is the inevitable candidate. She's the inevitable winner of the nomination. And what we're going to do now is we're going to let her come forward. She was going to come forward and try to claim that she was against Wall Street because she's getting pressure from the other candidates, namely Sanders and O'Malley, to be against Wall Street. She's getting pressure from the American people to go against Wall Street, who they know are trying to destroy them. And so she was going to get up there and come away from this event having, proven her populist anti-Wall Street chops. And I personally was able to prevent that from happening.
So
it was a lie. She stood up and she started talking, and it was just hot air. She was just lying. She praised Obama for a economic recovery, which is an outrageous thing to say. And then she started to say a few things about Wall Street, and I got to a point where the fact that she hadn't spoken about Glass-Steagall here less than a week after Senator Warren had introduced it, I couldn't let that happen.
So if she was really against Wall Street, then she would have mentioned Glass-Steagall.
Well, exactly. She would have thrown her whole weight behind it. And I was certainly hoping that she would. People change. That's the nature of the universe, is that people change for the better oftentimes, not always. So I was hoping that she would change. I was hoping that she would come to her senses right there in front of me. And since she didn't, towards the end of the event, at the last few words that she was speaking in her speech, the last couple of sentences, when I realized there was not a better opportunity to do it, I stood up and I said simply to her, as loud as I could, I said, "Senator Clinton, will you restore Glass-Steagall? Will you restore Glass-Steagall?" And she ignored me. And so I said it several times over. And certain people in the audience who were sitting at the front tried to start clapping to drown me out. And the security came up and they escorted me outside. And as I was being escorted out, I was getting my picture taken by the international media. And as soon as I walked out the door, it was a huge story. And I was interviewed by 9 or 10 different media sources. I was, reporters and so forth from all over the world. I was a video interview of me immediately went up in full onto BusinessInsider.com, and a very good article referring to me as a heckler.
Right. I wanted to make that point because when I tried to find any kind of information about it or a video, all that really comes up is referring to you as a heckler. I was like, wow, you ask a simple question to a presidential candidate and that's what they call you.
It's funny, right? Because she was never planning to take questions, and she doesn't even take questions from the media, much less from the average person.
Right.
But
exactly the quality you want in a presidential candidate.
Well, you want someone who's actually human. What is it? What is the standard of leadership? Just be a human being and tell the truth and do what's right. It doesn't mean you have to be that it doesn't mean you have to be a total genius. It helps.
Right.
It doesn't. Mostly, you just need to listen and think and honestly, intend to bring mankind forward as a species. And she doesn't have that intention. Because what Hillary has done is she's committed herself to Obama, who is a puppet of the British monarchy, and that is very clear if you look at everything he's done in his presidency. And so his policy is leading us into the depopulation of the United States and the threat of a thermonuclear war. And if she refuses to break from him, if she remains a stooge of Obama, then this kind of thing is what's going to happen.
So go ahead. Talk more about that, about the British monarchy and depopulation.
Well, it's just no surprise. It's no secret that the British monarchy are a bunch of Nazis. And this is the Nazi system. I don't just mean that they have Nazi sympathies. I mean that the whole idea of the British Empire, and therefore the British monarchy, and specifically the British monarchy as they have existed under Queen Elizabeth II, this is a policy of mass genocide across the world. And anyone who knows their history knows the situation going back many centuries. If you think about, I'll give you an example because I'm looking at a picture of John Kennedy on my piano right now. And what Kennedy's family came from Ireland the same time that mine did in the 1840s, when there was an enforced famine policy on Ireland being forced by the British Empire, by Queen Victoria herself. And this was a policy that led to about a 25% population reduction in Ireland. 2 million people out of 8 million within a space of about 4 or 5 years. 2 million people out of 8 million either emigrated or died in Ireland. And of the people who emigrated, about 60% of them died on the way out, on the ride over, and so forth. This was a murder policy. Right. Same kind of thing happened to India, many other locations besides those two, but these are two of the most famous and most horrendous cases. Now, Kennedy, when he was president, he spoke against the idea of Thomas Malthus. Now, do you know much about Parson Thomas Malthus?
No.
Okay, so Malthus was a guy who was employed by the British East India Company in the late 1700s as an economist, so to speak. And what he presented was the so-called scientific argument that claimed that the population was going to vastly outstrip the advance in agriculture and the exploitation of natural resources. And so that the greatest threat to society is population, overpopulation. And he prescribed a series of measures to keep the population down and even reduce the population. These included keeping people in a state of poverty and disease so they would die off more easily. And so that's what was done to the Irish. That's what was done to many different populations across the world. And that's the kind of thing that's being done now. Think about what's been done to Africa.
And Yemen currently is having a famine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yemen is being murdered. The Yemenis are being murdered by the Saudis, who were put on their position of power by the British in that 19th century period. These measures of evil are currently being promoted as against the intention of real American presidents, of real American, intentions as expressed in Kennedy and others. These policies of murder, that's what you're seeing happening in Greece.
Exactly. So that's also what was a theme on Thursday at the event at Federal Hall that you guys held, was that we are all Greece. So can you elaborate on...
Absolutely. I mean, look, what specifically... Well, we had a wonderful thing on Thursday, which is that we had one of our excellent members dressed up as the Queen.
Queen Elizabeth.
As Queen Elizabeth II, and saying the kind of things that the British tend to think, and saying them out loud. What the British Queen did recently was that she went to Germany, and she it was about 6 weeks ago, I believe, and she sat down with Merkel, and on the last day of the Queen's visit, the Queen made it very unusual for her to make this kind of state visit. She gave a public speech about the great German-British relationship. But what she did was, on the last day, Merkel and Schäuble, the the finance minister there, they got together and they forced upon Greece a advancement in this kind of evil austerity and bailout policy. They took a different tack. Until the Queen had arrived, there was actually a tendency towards some kind of solution that had something to do with reality. They were turning away from the worst policies, and then the last day of her visit, they decided to completely put the hammer down. And now Greece is in a situation that is almost hopeless in terms of their ability to protect their population. The pensioners are being destroyed. The young people are unemployed and fleeing the country. They're being depopulated. And it's a total control over the economy. Now, the threat is that you're going to see happen in Greece the same thing that you saw happen in Ukraine, which is that in Ukraine, Yanukovych, about two Februaries ago, he was forced out. He was literally forced out by an armed mob from his position as Prime Minister of Ukraine. And he, I believe it was Prime Minister, maybe it was President, I forget exactly. But anyway, it was because Yanukovych had said, we should work with Russia and the Eurasian Economic Customs Union instead of working with the European Union. Because the European Union went to Ukraine and said, why don't you join us as a kind of a vassal state, and you're going to help us out with agriculture, and we're going to take control of your financial system, and that's a great deal for you. Whereas the Russians and the Eurasian Economic Union, Customs Union, was saying to Ukraine, come in, and we want you to do high technology. Ukraine has a great history of high technology, space technology, industry, and so on. And so Yanukovych made a choice that's perfectly rational and strategically competent. And he said, let me go with Russia and the Eurasian system. And it was upon the basis of that decision that was made in the November before, that the process was put into place to throw him out. And now you have a Nazi government in Ukraine. Now, there's a grave threat that Greece will be put into the same kind of conditions, to the same kind of pretext, and that this will be used, Greece and Ukraine are going to be used as a means to pull off a thermonuclear war with Russia. Because the control over Ukraine and over Greece by right-wing governments, controlled through Victoria Nuland, Obama, NATO forces, the British, that is really being put up because there's an intention to get a war with Russia, to do anything possible to get Russia to back down, and regardless of whether Russia backs down, being prepared to go to a thermonuclear war. And there's much to be said on that. But the point is, what do the British want to do? They're very clear that Prince Philip has said repeatedly that he would like to come back as a deadly virus if he were reincarnated. He'd like to come back as a deadly virus to help with the problem of overpopulation. That's the way these people think. The leading British environmentalists, British-supported, British-backed environmentalists, say that we should reduce the world's population down to 1 billion.
Yes, starting with them, we should reduce them.
They really believe it when they would jump off a bridge, but they don't. And what they want to do is control. They want to keep mankind as in a kind of an animal state to be exploited by a few people at the top willing to do anything to keep their power.
Right, they're never the problem. They're I just call them sociopaths. They're never the problem. It's always the people that are the problem. And that's why nothing will ever change. I mean, you can renegotiate these supposed debts with Greece, and it will never change because it's those in control are never going to admit that and let go and ease up on some of the control.
Well, what you're looking for is the kind of situation in history where people decide that a Nazi system, it needs to be stopped. And what's happening right now in Britain is actually quite interesting, which is that on the front page of The Sun, which is the most widely circulated newspaper, as I understand it, in the United Kingdom, the Queen was outed as the royal family was outed as the Nazi sympathizers that they have been. Okay, there was on the Sun, it was about 3-4 days ago, there was a still from a video that's been released on YouTube of the Queen when she's about 6 or 7 years old with her younger sister and with her mother and with Prince Edward at the time. And the adults are teaching the young children how to salute the Nazi salute. Have you seen this, Catherine?
No.
This is extremely interesting and important because people have known that Prince Edward was a Nazi sympathizer. In fact, that he met with Hitler about 2 years before the war broke out, and he admired Hitler in his correspondence up until 1970, I guess, which was around when he passed away. So the British are, their approach, not the British people, but the British oligarchy and the British monarchy, their outlook on man is identical, if not far worse, to what we think of as the Nazi outlook, the Nazi idea of humanity. And the fact that this is now publicly being discussed is extraordinary. There's actually been a great amount of pressure in the UK over the past about 3 or 4 days for the British royal family to release more of these archived footage and photographs and correspondences and so forth to really expose what's going on there. Who are these people?
I'm looking at it now. The cover of The Sun. The cover reads, "Secret 1933 film shows Edward the Seventh teaching the Nazi salute to the Queen." Right? It's the 7th.
Yep, and to Queen Mum, Queen as we know her, yeah. Queen Mum, who was was the Queen's mother.
And wasn't that the same year that FDR introduced Glass-Steagall?
Hey, that's a very good point. Think about Glass-Steagall then from that perspective. what Roosevelt did was he defeated, along with the Soviet Union, along with the Chinese, but Roosevelt has a special importance in defeating the Nazi system. The United States has a special importance in defeating the Nazi system. Why were we able to do it? Why was Hitler afraid of the United States? Because he knew that the United States could outproduce Nazi Germany. Now, why was the United States able to outproduce Nazi Germany when just a couple of years earlier we had been in a horrendous economic blowout and depression, the Great Depression?
Right.
It was because Roosevelt took the measures with Glass-Steagall to establish a sound currency and a sound financial system such that he could initiate recovery programs. And in particular, the further point on that is that he took power away from those bankers on Wall Street that had fascist tendencies. I mean, who do you think financed Hitler? Who do you think financed Mussolini? It was people like J.P. Morgan.
Right.
Or other banking houses like that. Go on.
So let's talk about the BRICS.
Yes.
And how would that benefit for the U.S. to join the BRICS? So the BRICS are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and what's the last one?
South Africa.
South Africa, and they're making their own bank, taking the power away from the IMF, which they've already done, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I would put it from this standpoint. This is the blossoming of Lyndon and Helga LaRouche's and Helga LaRouche's policy and their whole personal identity over the past many decades. Lyndon LaRouche in 1975 first proposed the International Development Bank, which was a bank that was intended to serve the purpose of leading the third world nations into the next stage of mankind, into a stage of an industry of development, power systems, water systems, the ability to create healthcare for their population, the ability to bring science and the gifts of the human mind at the greatest height to the people of the planet. And what's happening now is that you have an alternative paradigm has been established in these BRICS nations. And it has so much to do with what this LaRouche organization has been fighting for and been able to do. I'll give you an example. The key of the whole Chinese policy right now is a policy that has a couple of names. One belt, one road is really the inclusive name. It refers to the New Silk Road and the Maritime New Silk Road, or belt, I guess it's called, which is a policy perspective of building up a mutually beneficial economic system all across the entirety of Eurasia. And the means of doing this is to establish rail systems with high speed as much as possible, with development corridors on either side. Development on either side of these rail lines, going over the territory of the ancient Silk Road that goes back to 2,000 years before Christ. And this is going to connect all of Eurasia from Lisbon to Shanghai. Much of it has already been built. Much of it is actually already in effect. And so much more has to be developed. But the real perspective on this is that rather than a system of empire and privation, based on looting, based on financial control, based on the kind of things that you've seen being done to Greece and to the United States, color revolutions, and the threat of thermonuclear war, the BRICS countries work on the basis of the potential of the future.
Right.
And so the great things that, like, I'll give you an example. There was a major BRICS conference in Ufa, Russia, July 8th through 10th, I believe, somewhere in that range. And immediately before the major events of the conference, there was a youth conference where they brought in youth from all these BRICS countries. and they asked the youth, students largely, so I imagine in their early 20s, and maybe younger than that, to brainstorm and to come up with, well, to present real serious policy proposals that could be adopted by the BRICS for the coming decades. And one of the key things that they agreed upon was the idea of a space station, a joint BRICS space station. So what you see from the BRICS countries is a kind of a development of mankind out of this planetary system of geopolitics, of fighting over natural resources, of divide and conquer. And instead you're going into mankind, into the solar system, and effectively into the galaxy, where you're going to be looking back on this stage of mankind and you're going to be thinking, that was merely an adolescence, merely a juvenile period, and now we've matured into a new stage of development.
So
you see what I mean?
Right, and so China doesn't want to own us. Like everyone says that China owns us because of the debt. So they're not looking to do that.
No, the Chinese, in fact, see, this is sort of why it's not entirely accurate to say that the BRICS banks have been created. Two big banks have been created. The news today is that in Shanghai, the new development bank, otherwise called the BRICS Bank, has just been sort of created into existence. Much of those things were decided upon at the UFA summit. There's also the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and together these will provide trillions of dollars of infrastructure investment capability over the coming years. The point is, these are inclusive organizations. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in particular is inclusive, and they do not anticipate, they're not intending to somehow destroy the IMF or defeat the IMF or something like that. The point is that there's a new system coming online that's going to subsume, it's just going to take into itself everything that already exists and bring it into something that is actually functioning. So the IMF is just, these kinds of policies are no longer going to be tolerated. They're no longer going to be possible, and something much better is going to come through, assuming that we don't have something catastrophic like the United States remaining cowardly and allowing Obama and the British monarchy to lead us into war, if you see what I mean.
Right. So what do you think the Prime Minister of Greece could have done differently instead of, ultimately increasing the debt of the Greek people? I had two guests on, talking about Greece, and people wrote in their articles about him being blackmailed, like he had no choice. Was there anything else?
I think that's largely accurate. I don't know what they happen to say, but he certainly was blackmailed. At this point, I frankly, Catherine, I would say, look, the question is what Americans are going to do. We're the ones that can change this. The only way to deal with the Greek debt and the European debt generally, and the bankruptcy of our system generally, is to pass Glass-Steagall and pass it now. And what I did a week and a day ago with Hillary has had very significant implications. Her whole idea of, her whole intention was ruined. She's been exposed. She's exposed herself. She's exposed herself as a stooge of Wall Street and Obama, and this has just smashed her credibility. Bernie Sanders signed on Friday as the 5th co-sponsor to the Senate bill. Obama was forced to answer the question through his press secretary, Ernest, on Friday about whether he would endorse Glass-Steagall. He was against it. All right, but there's still a lot of pressure trying to prevent Glass-Steagall from going forward. Wall Street is going to do everything that they can. The British monarchy are going to do everything that they can to prevent Glass-Steagall from being passed, from even, from being, demonstrated to be the most powerful policy that it is. And so I would call on each of your listeners and on you yourself, Catherine, to continue to work with us and to drive through within these next precious days in the end of July, to force Glass-Steagall to be adopted by the United States.
I just have one last question. So what is, because I proposed this question to Queen Elizabeth when I interviewed her on Thursday. You know, where does the U.S. fit into this? You know, are we going to end up like Greece? And, you know, she said that, you know, it's already happening here. Like, it's already in the works.
Well, absolutely. Look at what's happened to, I mean, you know, look what's happened to our cities. Look what's happened to the poverty within our nation, to the people. You know, my background is that for the couple of years that I was working before I became an organizer with LaRouche, I was working, you know, when I was, with the job I was working, that is, I was working as a teacher in New Orleans and then in Harlem. And the poverty is beyond the pale. The nation is sick. We have the lowest labor participation rate in 40 years. I don't even need to say it. There's been a horrible degeneration in our culture and our people, and it's up to a few of us who get it to go against the British monarchy, to say publicly the truth, and don't be afraid to say it.
Right.
And people should look to Lyndon LaRouche, who spent his entire life telling the truth. No matter the consequences, he's advised and played important advisory roles for multiple presidents. And he's also been thrown in jail on fraudulent charges by George H.W. Bush and his associates. And LaRouche is still kicking at 93 nearly, and the man knows what he's doing. So I would urge people to join us on our website. You know, go to LaRouchePAC.com. Thursday nights at 9 p.m. LaRouche is speaking directly to the population, and you can ask him a question through YouTube. You can do any of these things, but join us in that way. It's extremely important. He knows what can be done. And, we have a competency in scientific economy through LaRouche and his associates that is going to be needed for this transitional presidency that's going to have to come through as we move Obama out of the way, who can no longer be allowed to control our policy. So that's where I'm coming from on all of this.
And you had said at the event on Thursday at Federal Hall that Wall Street is bankrupt.
Well, 100%. It's, look, people believe that the valuation of derivatives is accurate, or that somehow derivatives are like, yeah, they might be kind of a swindle, but really they're the substance of our economy. And that's a load of horse manure. That the derivatives are worthless. They have nothing to do with real physical productivity and the increase of physical productivity.
There's a disconnect between reality with people. I mean, they don't know what's real and what isn't. Like, what has real value?
We're sleepwalking into the biggest financial crash in history. And there's one way to deal with it, which is to restore the standard that which contributes to the advance of the general welfare over the generations to come is real, and that which is merely speculation is not real. We don't count it as something that the government is going to acknowledge as needing protection. We count speculation and Wall Street as evil. That's what we should do.
Right.
The system of usury, the system of Wall Street, the system of total looting and destruction. That's not human. That's anti-human.
Right.
Human is the advance of science, the advance of the living standards of mankind, of our culture, so that people can again, see themselves as part of a society that is in motion towards the future.
Right.
As brothers and sisters in that fight, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Daniel Burke. Please visit the website LaRouchePAC.com.
Thank you very much for having me on, Catherine.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, I hope I get to see you again soon.
Yeah, good luck to you.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that was the interview from earlier today. Please go to LaRouchePAC.com, get more information on Glass-Steagall. I'm going to just play a little clip from Thursday's event in front of Federal Hall that Daniel spoke. It's just going to be a short bit of the group, the chorus, singing the battle cry for freedom song, and then just the short interview with the activist that was playing Queen Elizabeth.
We are swinging to the call, our brothers gone before, shouting the battle cry of freedom, and fulfill our thanking thanks with brilliant feet and roar, shouting the battle cry of freedom, the Union forever, around was around, the wind trigger, our wind star, while we bury down the flag, was ready once again.
Queen Elizabeth, tell us why this group is here with all these signs about Greece and Glass-Steagall right in front of the New York Stock Exchange today.
Well, this group represents a bunch of intolerable miscreants who intend to tear down the system of global governance. We're now at a crossroads where it's very, very clear that we must reduce world population, we must reduce the destructive activity of mankind on the planet, or we will have no planet that would be capable of sustaining human life. Therefore, I am here to vehemently oppose their plan to restore the Glass-Steagall law and break the power of Wall Street over their government and over their economy.
So what are the banks trying to do? What are you helping? What are you in favor of them doing?
Oh, they have run up the biggest speculative bubble in world history, and its collapse will ensure wiping out the vast majority of humankind on the planet.
And you would like that?
Oh, definitely. In fact, my husband, Prince Philip, has stated it publicly on several occasions that his fondest wish is to be reincarnated as a deadly virus so that he can do his bit to reduce world population.
And so the point of Greece, what's happening in Greece, is to collapse their economy.
It's to crush their resistance and to make an example of them, because everyone must comply.
And then after Greece, who's going to be next?
We'll see. Perhaps Italy, Spain, Portugal, Russia, China.
The U.S.?
The U.S. is already subject.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that video, again, it's on my YouTube channel, April Waters, Watters. Donations are greatly, greatly needed and appreciated. So that was a demonstrator playing Queen Elizabeth, saying that, right, the plan is to crush Greece, and then like John Perkins, the economic hitman, says, this is what the corporatocracy does. Okay, so I'm going to move now to ADAM KOKESH, also interviewed earlier today. He was in Brooklyn and the city this weekend, Saturday, talking about his book called Freedom and what it means to truly be free. Okay, ADAM KOKESH, thank you for tuning in with me on Organic News on Awake Radio. You've been on, I think this might be like the third time, and you were just, you're in actually still the East Coast. You're in Linden, New Jersey over the weekend. On Saturday you were in Brooklyn, which I attended, and then Saturday evening you were in New York City, and you're going around doing a tour for your book called Freedom.
Yeah, it's been incredible. The American Campfire Freedom Tour. We don't have campfires everywhere we go, and we haven't had one in New York, but we have met amazing people, and it's really cool to see that. I get to make the joke about being a good politician. You know, when you see a riot, you jump out in front of it and call it a parade. I really think that there's a very beautiful cultural shift going on along with the awakening towards freedom. And I mean, in a couple of ways, and of course, the broadest of developing, better living humans, people that are able to enjoy life more and live more deliberately and consciously and passionately. But even more so than that, specifically within the freedom movement of conscientious people, this message now, we're working to move humanity forward, there's a movement towards sharing the message in a different way. And it used to be about sharing a lot of negativity and using the tactics of emotional manipulation, of the state propaganda even, to get people to care about freedom. Like, hey, you're getting angry at people or guilting people for for liking a cat picture instead of your important story about whatever on the news. And now it's really more to sharing joy freedom, sharing the personal freedom, sharing the practical things that it allows you to do to make your life better. They're so beautiful. And I get to ask people everywhere we go, what do you see people doing differently in their daily lives as a result of this awareness of the message? And the answers are just, it's amazing, and it's really cool that it's happening, in different ways. There's a little, very texture to it throughout the United States where we've been so far, at least, but people are taking charge of their own health, which might mean growing their own food, deciding for themselves what is an appropriate medicine, as opposed to, let's say, the medical establishment. And raising free-range children, homeschooling, unschooling, avoiding vaccinations or paperwork, all of those things. To authorities, like how you talk to cops is different, of course. Being a conscientious consumer of information. Well, what drugs you do, when the government says it's not safe, that's usually not true. What opens up when you do the research for yourself? And then taking charge of your own health, working out, and I think it's really cool to see. I mean, for me, as someone who was a fitness enthusiast before I was a really conscious vegetarian, to be able to see now how, I can step back and look at all the people I know in the freedom movement and know that, it's not a gym, but it's a very health-conscious group of people. And that awareness that's growing with all of that sort of self-actualization that comes also with meditation, or maybe the sensation of everything being right in the universe that is forced with acid. But people are coming to a deeper sense of self-awareness and self-acceptance that at a deeper level, if that was simply adopted universally, and I know libertarians always like to be like, if everybody just did this, the government would be done in a day or something like that. But there are a few things that really hold true like that, like nonviolent communication. If everybody was a master practitioner of nonviolent communication, government would be obsolete, certainly within a generation.
Right.
But, this is one of those things that if everybody had true emotional freedom, if everybody was impervious to the negative emotional manipulations of state propaganda, then the state would clearly lose a major foundation of its power.
If people saw what had real value.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too.
I feel like, the paper fiat money that man makes has really convinced people that's what has real value at the expense of the real value that you're talking about.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's even deeper than that, because you can say, well, I value money and I value material wealth. I value, the power that comes with that and the responsibility, and that's fine. There's nothing, morally wrong about that. But if all you do is trade your gold and Bitcoin, then you might be missing the point about how you get to really enjoy life more by being free and freeing yourself from, I hate to say from materialism, because I still believe in the, foundational material of self-ownership and property rights. But the only way that money buys happiness beyond taking care of your own needs is when you spend it on other people.
Right.
And I think when as a capitalist for myself, when we see, what is the result of free exchange, we can't be counting just dollars and widgets or even ounces of gold or bitcoins or anything like that. What we have to count as the ultimate productive measure of the free market is human happiness, is that kind of value in life experience. And that's increasing, and I think people are seeing that is so much more relevant. And that makes, when you're able to see that, and it really, as pervasive as government is, it's so frustrating sometimes to just look up from your computer and be like, oh my gosh, government really is everywhere. Like, it really touches every aspect of our lives. But when you think about the real value of happiness that you get to choose for yourself at any time, that
every loving relationship that you have is an economic exchange of time and attention and affection, and the most immense ways that we can share value. Then you realize that government's role, while pervasive, is really not that significant in what you're capable of in terms of living free for yourself.
Right. It sounds like, so you're talking about, just getting back in touch with what really matters, what has real value, our connection to nature, the fact that, we are a part of nature, and we have this power to cultivate, we talked about it Saturday at the barbecue in Brooklyn, just about cultivating relationships. I use the term farming because, living in the habitat that man has created has really cut us off, from the natural world and our connection to it and where things come from and the fact that we are, in fact, a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, these are just this is still, doesn't challenge the libertarian capitalist mindset, and that was kind of a weird thing for me to realize. It's just a better way of putting more comprehensive metrics on the effectiveness of free trade. That is nonviolent relationships.
Right. Fair trade. Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Your Skype is coming in good now. It was a little bit breaking up before. Okay, so a couple of the topics that we were talking about, health was one of the things that came up, and people having, the ability to choose, psychedelics came up, smoking marijuana. Aside from just for medicinal health purposes, do you want to talk about your views and what you write about on that?
Sure. Well, it's really exciting to just take a step back and appreciate where we are now historically, right now in American history in regards to the drug war. I would describe this as the beginning of the end of the war on drugs, and it represents such a huge chunk of the government racket falling away, which is just when you understand the pervasiveness of that, the interests in marijuana being illegal, that originally the paper industry and then the pharmaceuticals and law enforcement and the prison industry, the judicial complex. All of these rackets that are attached. Really, the war on drugs is a general effort, but the vast majority of that being marijuana prohibition, and to see that racket just falling away is so exciting right now. And the most exciting thing for me about it, in the historical political sense, is how the conversation around it is shifting. And I wish I had a better way of measuring this, but I think the conversation around marijuana, even just 10 years ago, was marijuana should be legal because it's safer than alcohol. Alcohol is legal. And that there was a strong resistance to that. There was a strong rebuttal. I remember trying to make that case, and people would say, well, I don't really know about that. And even if that's the case, well, we can only just handle one legal drug, or maybe the answer then is for alcohol to be illegal too. And, to someone who believes in freedom, those are all very scary answers. But now the argument seems to be going a lot more along the lines of, no, marijuana should be legal because I decide what I put in my body. And that just expectation of freedom, you might say expectation of liberty with a political context, fine. But that expectation of freedom is an important shift in how people view recreational drugs and even self-medicating drugs or therapeutic drugs. And it's so important that we see the whole spectrum of what we can do with our health and our minds and what we can put in our bodies as part and parcel of one and the same thing, from pharmaceuticals and prescriptions to Advil that you have in your first aid kit to mushrooms to acid. And I think it's fair to say that America is experiencing a psychedelic renaissance right now. And, I had my small part in it, smoking my first 6 DMT sessions on camera for YouTube.
And, you know, I've got a little experience since then, but really just encouraging people to take charge of their own consciousness and to look at these things, and, you know, when they can be done safely and deliberately in a manner that, you know, you're comfortable with, where you've done your research, you know what you're getting into, and you can do it in a conscientious and deliberate way. I think it's good for everybody to be able to make informed decisions about these things, whether they're right for themselves or not.
Yeah.
But what I see at this, about this, that is so much more exciting even, is how it relates to, I don't want to call it a spiritual awakening. And, you know, I apologize for being imprecise or not ready with the terminology that I think is most appropriate for this, because it's not something I've been talking about for a long time. But the deeper level of consciousness, of awakening, of awareness, that, you know, it represents a step forward in human evolution. Maybe those are all the words you need for it. And I think a lot of people are able to come to a different level of self-awareness as a result of experimenting with their consciousness in various ways.
Yeah, I found myself on Saturday in the backyard, because I'm not that accustomed to, you know, to speaking about this, you know, kind of stuff, even though I've tried for a long time. You know, the words, they don't come that easily. You know, it's something that I, you know, hope to get, you know, better at as we, you know, feel that it is more acceptable to kind of, you know, to talk about this stuff. So like, what exactly, if you could say what you mean by freedom, like what does freedom mean to you? Because again, like what you just described, you know, as far as, you know, what people put in their bodies, and as long as they do it in conscientious, you know, mindful ways, exactly, like that's sort of the key. Like the reason why, you know, drugs tend to get abused is because they're made illegal. They're forbidden.
Right. So to go back, you wanted me to talk about how this relates to what now?
To freedom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the word itself, the definition, I mean, in the most direct political sense, or the most, you know, obvious definition, and the most important primary definition for me, is an absence of coercion. The right to exercise your circumstances in which the ability to exercise your will without forceful interference is fully respected by everyone around you. And that's the sort of irrefutable textbook out there, you know, philosophical definition of freedom, and that's pretty easy. And to apply that universally and to come to the conclusion that government is contrary to freedom is really not, you know, a hard one for any open-minded person to come to as a rational conclusion. But we talk about freedom in a lot of other ways, and what's been important to me of late is this idea of emotional freedom. And we talk about how government, you know, the only reason this is in our book, Freedom, aside from the fact that we want to give people this immediate value of the emotional freedom to choose your demeanor at any time and really understand that beauty of the human experience, but it relates to the political freedom or the external freedom or the primary definition of freedom, in the sense that it is only failures of emotional freedom that lead to violations of physical freedom. And the way that we are manipulated and going along with systems that violate our freedom is through emotional manipulation. So there's a whole other world, you know, that I plan to write more about in the future. You know, there's a whole series of books that we're going to be writing based on this format that's been so successful so far. But at very least, we need to, if you want to see physical freedom, even if you don't care about your own, you know, internal freedom, and I think that'd be kind of a silly proposition, you have to at least see the value in examining how your respect for your own will internally, the way we expect our will externally to be respected in a free society, is manipulated by those who want to control us externally through the emotional manipulation of government propaganda, of fear, of stoking anger and division, and you know, trying to get people to see government as this all savior parent figure.
So right, you're not talking about freedom in like this hedonistic sense, like a lot of people would maybe take the word freedom and, think that that's what it means, which, is kind of what the powers that be do. Like, I'm just gonna, recently there's the TPP they're trying to pass, and, it's, corporations' rights to just, do whatever they want, no matter what, nothing can stop their profits. Not the environment, no environmental regulations, And so, like, I mean, you're speaking about freedom in a healthy way.
Well, what you're referring to there is an important concern that a lot of people have in the proposition of a stateless society, and I think it's kind of an absurd proposition to suggest somehow that what we're experiencing now, that is having communal property or unclaimed property or natural resources being managed by the most violent people in the world who have no accountability for their actions except through the joke of the political process.
Right.
And what we end up with is great legal protections that wouldn't exist in a free society for polluters, for people who damage the earth, who prevent people from having equitable access to natural resources. So it really is perverse, that this political Stockholm syndrome that people experience of loving their captors, of loving their abusers in government, means that they make endless excuses for them, but that they've bought into this completely backwards way of looking at how do we protect natural resources, and having a system based on violence and corruption is not the way to go, apparently, anyway. Philosophy should be enough to let you come to that conclusion with absolute confidence, but the historical record now is overwhelmingly clear, and it is a great disaster to see how much of our environment has been destroyed because of statism, because we have allowed there to be this market for violent control.
Just on that note, with the environment, John McCain just slipped in to the NDAA and gave rights to copper mine in this sacred Native American land in Arizona, which is also being fought currently. And in your book on page 72, you write about bullying. I'll just read this one paragraph. To bully someone is to try to affect their attitude or behavior through intimidation or threat. This implies the use of some superior force. By definition, there is no organization of force superior to government. Every law it passes is backed by the threat of force. Predictably, government bullying is not restricted to its official and stated purposes. Because they create arbitrary authority, governments encourage bullying by individuals who can use authority against people like police, bureaucrats, and politicians. So you basically agree that government is bullying and forced coercion.
Well, I've included a few sections in the book that I was a little more or less apprehensive about including, and they've all been received perfectly well as an important, comprehensive part of this message. And one was the parts of chapter 10 and chapter 9. But you're the first one to bring up bullying and remind me that I was a little. It was one that I wasn't sure about including. And the paragraph that you read there, I'm really brings back good memories writing that and deciding to include it, because I didn't think of it at first as bullying as that paragraph is as a way of explaining government, but actually of explaining bullying behavior as a real social issue, and in all its forms, whether it's online bullying or in-person bullying in a schoolyard where kids are forced to be together. And obviously, you get rid of the government school system, that environment kind of goes away, but you still have the social tendency toward bullying. And I wanted to start that chapter by showing how government is based on a bullying paradigm. Encourages it, validates it, and robs you of the opportunity as a parent or someone trying to educate a child to say that you are somehow part of a moral example, when they understand that they are essentially bullied into going to government schools. every kid knows, like, hey, what happens if I don't go to school? Well, you get in trouble. Well, your parents get in trouble. Well, you get taken away at some point. They all get that. And I mean, at least I did. I think most of my peers did, at least by the time we were in middle school. So if you I really was just looking at this from the perspective of, if your major concern is, how do we deal with bullying? How do you deal with kids on the street, not wanting to mess with each other and or wanting to screw around, or in a school environment that there's bullying, and I think it's a broader social issue. I mean, you heard the story from Linden, New Jersey on Friday. I was confronted by a would-be bully who came down and prevented me from leaving the venue that we were at, and said we needed to step outside, and he was going to beat me up for saying things that were disrespectful of the military. In that case, I was able to talk him down. But it just goes to show how easy it is to diffuse something like that when you understand its root causes. And it's not just that the state is responsible for all the bullying, but that there's a very deep psychological connection between individual bullying and the statist paradigm and all of the other, coercive violence in society.
If I could add that, I just got an echo coming. When was it? March, down in D.C., they had the Spring Rising against wars. It was a really good event. War people, so a lot of good people were speaking, all coming together, families against the wars. Kevin Lucy, who lost his son, Jeff, who came back from Iraq and committed suicide, talking about things like, of course, post-traumatic stress, and Matthew Ho using the term moral injury, and people, some vets in the audience talking about, their experiences. One man who actually kind of, broke down, just talking about the extreme aggression and how everything, it's like if you're not extremely aggressive, these are things that I've been basically teaching myself, for decades about balance, balancing the hard and the soft. Yoga practice is all about balancing the hard and the soft. Fitness is all about balancing the hard and the soft. And, everything had, because we've gotten so disconnected from nature, and nature is all about, balancing the hard and the soft. And things are just so aggressive, trying to, just get everything you can from the earth, everything you can from your own body, pushing your body to its limits. People feeling like, unless they're super aggressive, they're somehow, weak.
Well, I think that's part of the psychological evolution that we're going through, is a realization of true value. And this is just a beautiful thing to see market forces at work. And the market favors nonviolence over violence, because people have a preference for productivity. People have a preference for having stuff versus not having stuff. Violence means less stuff. Getting along, harmony means more stuff. I mean, it's just sort of in all of these basic laws of the human experience. Very, at least the correct ones all fit together very neatly.
And you also talk about, well, first of all, I was going to just ask you, for the people that are not familiar, how you got started on this path, being in Iraq, being in Fallujah. Can you just talk about that and what you saw and how you saw that the war was not about bringing freedom to this country?
Well, gee, I mean, that's, I get tired of telling my own story, but yeah, I mean, it goes back to being a libertarian in high school and not knowing what it meant, to being in Fallujah in 2004 and, not really being able to know what was going on, but to take that experience for later and really be able to see that my model didn't add up. My status understanding of the world just didn't square with my experience. And, I still volunteered to go back to Iraq, but the major break from authority for me was getting in trouble for bringing back a pistol from Iraq the first time I deployed, the only time I deployed. And then, while I was volunteering, waiting waiting to go back to Iraq, or volunteered to go back to Iraq, getting in trouble for that, and being, getting out of the Marines, being pretty disgruntled. And as I say, it was just disgruntled enough to start questioning things. So that was the start of the, deliberate seeking of a deeper understanding. And then while I was running for office in 2010, I read Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard, and that's what really finished the process for me, if you will, where I could say, okay, now I really accept this philosophical framework as the most important fundamental truth. And, some people think, that that's the bottom of the rabbit hole. Of course, it's not. And the only time you're ever wrong is when you think you've hit the bottom of the rabbit hole, because there is no bottom. But that was the process for me. And it really took a whole 10 years from saying I'm a libertarian to really understanding what it meant.
So your plan now is you're traveling and stopping in places and talking about your book. And what kind of reception are you getting from people?
Well, it's been amazing. We're talking mostly to the hardcore and the true believers right now. But, like I said, there's a cultural shift going on in the movement towards outreach, towards, people don't want to, there's a lot of ego-driven, wasted time in our movement. And I'm as guilty of it as anyone. Of people wanting to be right about stuff, and wanting to be right about everything and have all the answers. But, you reading one more book about how the Federal Reserve works is not going to end the state 1 minute sooner. In fact, it's going to make it last longer, because that's time that you could be spending instead sharing this message and waking other people up. And so I think that's what's happening, and that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're encouraging, and that's what I put together this one particular tool for that we challenge people to use. And it's the challenge that I've been giving people on the road is, read the book, and if it's not the most effective way for you to wake someone else up, then find what it is, because I guarantee that is the activism that you will find the most satisfying.
And what do you want to say to people? You did that video after the American Sniper movie came out. For people to not, buy into that kind of mentality as far as, the wars and what the role is, the U.S. role is in these countries.
Well, with that video, it was, it was fun, and it's an interesting way to engage with people and get people to think. But, even that kind of stuff I've kind of gotten away from, and thinking that it's more important to win converts. And it was cool to talk to people about American Sniper, and in those circumstances, really finish the conversation and get them to some rational, positive conclusion. But I'd rather, if I'm going to go talk to strangers, I'd almost rather challenge them on the sense.
Okay, hold on. There's a few more minutes.
On the tour is how many, we have these events, is how many of you can honestly say that everyone in your immediate family that you're in regular contact with understands why freedom is important to you, and, what this message means to your life. And, we very, very rarely get more than a couple of hands, because people are, haven't taken the time. And so now we say there's no excuse. You've got this easy tool. You've got this way to simply ask people, can you read the first 9 pages? The whole thing is summed up in the first 9 pages. Can you just take the time? I'll listen to the first 15 minutes of the audiobook with you. Let's do it. But, please just take the time to consider something that I care about. And I think a lot more people are spreading the message like that now.
So it sounds like, if you could sum it up, it sounds like people just knowing their rights.
It's a lot more than that.
Like how? If people, knew their rights more, they do think that they're kind of being taken care of, or that their government is protecting their rights. And that is, again, you know, more and more people are finding out that that's not the case, that you do have to take, you know, responsibility for your life, and that, you know, and sometimes dealing with police, they're not there to be looking out for your rights. You know, just getting informed, right? Reading, you know, some books are definitely, you know, worth reading for people to, you know, to learn some information that can definitely benefit them. So what?
I think it's really a singular realization of what freedom is to the individual, and you know how it can make your life better, and people are embracing that. And for some people, it's in asserting your rights, but knowing them, you know, obviously isn't enough by itself.
Yeah, we definitely need. So you believe? I mean, do you have like an idea of a critical mass or anything like that? Like you know, how many, or you know, what percentage of people need to you know, be informed, to want freedoms and health, and to wean themselves off of the system?
Well, it's a critical mass for what? For the absolute abolition of the state and establishment of a voluntary society?
Yeah.
I think we got a long ways to go for that, but
Yeah.
to begin the paradigm shift, the paradigm shift has begun certainly, but to you know, take the paradigm shift into its primary transition phase, which I think we're still accelerating towards. You know, I mean, it's impossible to say at what point along that you can say government will be abolished, but it's definitely coming within the next few decades. You know, major shifts in this direction, one way or another.
I hope it comes before 1 decade. So you're going to be, Liberty Fest, and you're going to be speaking at that this October.
I'll be seeing it. I'm really looking forward to it, actually.
And it's going to be in New York again, I believe.
Yep.
Do you know the date yet?
October 10th and 11th, and the website is lfnyc.com.
lfnyc.com. And your book is called Freedom, and the website is
thefreedomline.com. That's it. Everything is there. You can find my YouTube channel, all my social media hookups, and most importantly, free book downloads at thefreedomline.com.
free book downloads. Definitely not a capitalist. Thank you so much, ADAM KOKESH. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.